36 seconds in, Trump slammed the table, pointed at Jasmine Crockett, and spat the words, "She's low IQ, I dare her to take a test." Cameras snapped, gasps rose. But Jasmine didn't blink. She reached into her folder, pulled out a sealed envelope, and let it fall like a hammer. What was inside that made the most arrogant man in America sit back in silence like he'd just seen a ghost? The hearing room looked like it hadn't seen a real truth in years. Everything was too perfect, like someone had Windex democracy. The marble floors glistened like wet ice. The walls were polished tough point, you could see your conscience in them. Flags stood behind the dais stiff and lifeless, like they'd been ironed into submission. Even the air felt staged, too cold, too sterile. Like Simeon had frizzed the tension right out of the air, but left the fear behind. Red lights from the microphones blinked like sniper dots on every seat above them. The ceiling lights didn't glow. They stabbed, bright surgical clinical designed to expose every crack, every drop of sweat, every twitch in the face of someone lying through their teeth. This wasn't just Capitol Hill, this was Capitol Theater. In today's headliner, a woman who didn't need a microphone to make her presence known. Jasmine Crockett walked in like she'd done this before, but never like this. Her heels didn't clack, they struck. Each step landed with the rhythm of a countdown, not toward detonation, but revelation. She wore no flashy color, no flashy smile, just a midnight blue suit sharp, enough to cut through pretense, and a gaze steady enough to freeze the smug right off a billionaire's face. Jim Jordan caught sight of her first. He nudged Eric Trump, leaned in and mumbled something like, "High school boys in the back of detention," half laughing, half scared, all arrogance. Eric looked over his shoulder, sized her up like she was an outfit his daddy didn't approve of, and shook his head. Already seated at the witness table was the storm in orange flesh, Donald J. Trump. Elbows planted, fingers, steepled grin wide. The kind of grin that said, "This room belongs to me. The cameras belong to me. The truth belongs to me." He didn't nod in greeting. He didn't blink. Just locked eyes with Jasmine as she passed like a lion trying to psych out the one animal in the wild that didn't care about his roar. But Jasmine, she didn't flinch. She didn't even acknowledge the noise. She sat down without a sound, opened her folder like it was Sunday Mass, and she had the sermon prepared and laid one envelope gently in the center. No label, urgency, just paper and silence. But somehow the air changed when it touched the wood, like static, like gunpowder. CNN's feed zoomed in. MSNBC sharpened their audio. Twitter was already halfway to exploding. The phrase IQ test was trending, even though it hadn't been spoken aloud yet. Chairman M.L.N. Claridis, throat like he was about to read a verdict. Today's hearing will examine academic transparency credentials, use-setting campaign claims, and the role of standardized testing in public leadership. He didn't look at Trump, Buttram did. Jasmine tapped the envelope once. Just once, not hard, but sound landed like a judge's gavel. Sharp, final, undeniable. Trump's smile faltered just for a beat. No one else saw it, but Jasmine did. And when a man like Trump blinks first, you don't need to shout. You just sit still and let that trap snap shut on its own. What happens when the loudest man in America dares the wrong woman to speak? The silence in the room was so dense it had weight. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that comes before thunder. Trump leaned closer to the mic, straightened his shoulders like he was gearing up for applause, and started reading from his prepared remarks on education reform, but he didn't get far. He barely made it through a sentence on restoring American excellence in academic standards before his eyes flicked toward Jasmine, and the air shifted. He paused, smiled, not the kind that charms, but the kind that coils, and frankly, he began, voice smooth like oil on concrete. "Some off these people, they're not qualified to be in this room. I mean, look at that one." His finger lifted, not quite pointing, but angled in Jasmine's direction, like a loaded weapon. Low IQ.AOC2. I wouldn't let either of them run a classroom, let alone Congress. Their right was, the first strike, blunt, calculated, and just vague enough to avoid censure until the cameras caught every syllable. A faint chuckle broke from the right side of the room. Marjorie Taylor Greene's laugh, sharp, nasal, smug. She covered her mouth as if to mask it, but her shoulders shook. Jim Jordan smirked. Eric Trump leaned back in his chair like a kid proud of his father for landing a punch. Around them, Republican aides tried not to smile, but they didn't need to. The moment had landed. They thought they'd rattled her, but Jasmine Crockett didn't move, didn't link, didn't reach for the mic. She just sat there, still collected, a single fingertip resting gently on the sealed envelope in front of her, like it was a detonator she hadn't decided to press. Inside her head, the noise was louder than any chamber mic. They want rage, she thought. They want the angry black woman moment. They want the soundbite. I'll give them something quieter, something they won't see coming. Trump, emboldened, pressed on. "You know, I've taken IQ tests, very hard ones. They don't just let anybody take those. You know, you have to be a genius." His grin stretched wider. "I passed with flying colors. That's why I'm here, and they're all struggling. He didn't look at the chairman. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked directly at Jasmine. And then with the same breathless arrogance he used to announce bankruptcies and pardons, he said it. Let's settle this with an IQ test. 8 words. That's all it took. 8 words that would ricochet across social media within seconds. 8 words that would split room like glass under pressure. 8 words that would, in 24 hours, come back to haunt him. The tension cracked. Reporters blinked. Phones went up. Gasps stirred like wind in a wheat field. And yet, Jasmine didn't even raise an eyebrow. She simply shifted in her seat, lifted the envelope ever so slightly, and slid it 1 inch closer to the mic. The gesture was quiet, but it landed like thunder. Trump didn't notice it. Hugh was too busy watching the crowd relishing the chaos he thought he controlled. But chaos Jasmine knew was easier to control than facts, especially when they came in sealed white paper. And behind that paper was a truth 31 million Americans weren't ready for. Not yet, but they would be, because Donald Trump had just challenged the wrong woman to a test. The room hadn't recovered from the blow yet. Trump leaned back in his chair like a boxer who thought he'd already won the match in round 1. Eric smirked. Beside him, scrolling through his phone, probably watching the clip already, trending, on X. Jim Jordan whispered to Marjorie, who scribbled something in bold Sharpie across a yellow notepad. Everyone thought Jasmine Crockett had taken the hit and stayed down. But then Jasmine leaned toward the clerk's desk calmly, even politely. "I'd like to move my questioning to the end of the session," she said. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was the kind of calm that makes a room shift slow and almost invisible, like a change in barometric pressure before a tornado. The clerk blinked. The chairman paused. And after a beat too long, he nodded, approved. Nobody blinked. Nobody asked why, but a few eyes narrowed just slightly. They knew something had changed. They just didn't know what. Meanwhile, 2 aides from Jasmine's office moved silently in the back corridor, like ghosts with purpose. One carried a black leather, the other, a flat brown envelope, thick but sealed. At the top, in fading typewriter ink, were 4 words that hadn't seen daylight in over 60 years. Confidential 1964 admissions. Jasmine had looked back as it arrived. She didn't need to. The moment it touched the table behind her chair, she felt it. Not in her hands, in her spine. The weight of history has a pulse of its own. She reached back, slid the envelope into her papers, and rested her fingers on it like she was holding down a ghost trying to rise too early. Across their room, Trump kept talking, rambling now about schools failing test scores, dropping these people, not understanding what America really needs. The words were loud, but they didn't land anymore. Not where it mattered, because Jasmine wasn't listening to him. She was listening to a memory years ago. Her father, an inner-city teacher who never made more than $42,000 a year, once told her at the kitchen table, "The most dangerous thing you can bring into a room is the truth, dressed like a whisper." She was 9. She didn't understand it then. Now she lived by it. She smiled. Not the kind that showed teeth. The kind that showed calculation. Poised. The kind of smile a chess master makes before sliding a pawn that traps the king in 3 moves. The chairman called for recess. Chairs scraped. Reporters typed. Security shifted. Trump stretched and laughed about wasting time in nobodies. But for the first time since she entered the room, he didn't look at Jasmine because somewhere in his instincts, buried under ego and layers of spin, something told him she wasn't done. Not even close. And she wasn't holding paper. She was holding proof. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that detonates. But what was in that envelope that would make Donald Trump wish the cameras had been turned off? The mood in the room had changed, but no one could say exactly when. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with music or shouting. It was the way air feels different before a thunderstorm, the kind that turns leaves upside down and makes animals go silent. Something had shifted, and it was coming from Jasmine Crockett's seat. She hadn't spoken since Trump's outburst. Not a word, not eglants, but her silence had weight now. She'd requested the final questioning slot, and no one dared challenge her. Again, it was as if by saying nothing, she'd somehow taken the floor, and no one noticed until it was too late. The cameras noticed, though. CNN's feed zoomed in, catching her face between movements. That gaze, still unreadable, wasn't anger, it was focus. Like someone watching a clock they'd already set to detonate. Even the hosts back in the studio stammered. Well, it looks like Congresswoman Crockett is holding something back today. We'll stay on Harrowfeed." Outside the chamber, buzz built like static. NBC's news alert pinged. Jasmine Crockett declines immediate rebuttal, asked to go last. The headlines: does Crockett have something bigger, silence, or strategy? Inside, she didn't blink. She just sat with that folder in front of her, quiet, deliberate fingers, loosely curled around a pen she hadn't uncapped every so often. She glanced at her watch. Not the time, just the rhythm. Like she was syncing her breath to something no one else could hear. 3 seats away, Marjorie Taylor Greene finally whispered to Jim Jordan, "She's rattled. She's got nothing." Jordan did, but not confidently. His eyes kept drifting to Jasmine's folder, to the envelope beneath it. Trump, meanwhile, had shifted from arrogance to indulgence, talking louder, broader, dropping self-congratulations. Like confetti. Frankly, folks, I think this has been one of my best hearings. Nobody even tried to debate me. His voice siegeoed across the marble like bad theater. We all know who's qualified in this room and who isn't. But Jasmine wasn't watching him. She was watching the room, watching who laughed, who shifted in their seats, who avoided eye contact. She wasn't here to argue. She was here to let the rope play out until the knot tightened itself. One of her Roddies leaned silent, surgical, entered the side hallway and passed a small signal. A nod, a quiet glance toward her phone. Jasmine read the message once and slid it away without reaction. The last piece had arrived. The document was confirmed. The source was real. It wastes time, but not yet. Let him keep smiling. Let them all keep laughing. Because thieving about traps is they work best when no one knows they're standing in one. And Jasmine Crockett wasn't wetting Beckos. She was afraid. She was waiting because when the truth drops, when it really drops, it's not a clap, it's an earthquake. And this hearing room had no idea how close the fault line was. It came without fanfare, just a soft knock at the side door of the chamber. One of Jasmine's aides entered, holding a plain manila envelope, tucked tight under one arm, like a message too dangerous to unfold in public. No one noticed her at first. That was the beauty of timing. In a room obsessed with sound silence, always carried the sharpest blade. Jasmine didn't look up right away. She waited until the aide stood directly behind her chair, then reached back, not with urgency, but precision. Her fingers closed around the envelope like it wasn't paper, but a match. And somewhere deep in her memory, her father's voice the most dangerous thing you can carry into a room is the truth, dressed like a whisper. She placed it beneath her notes, careful, calm, as if it were just another file in a stack. But it wasn't. It was the one, the last piece, the one that had taken weeks of silence, a signed affidavit, to background checks, and the cooperation of a man who hadn't spoken publicly in 58 years. The name on the document was redacted, but Jasmine knew it by heart. Robert Steedman, a former military school classmate of Donald J. Trump. A man whose face had aged hard, but whose memory hadn't blinked once during a 2-hour deposition conducted by Crockett's legal team. He had taken the SATs in place of Trump in 1964, and he had kept the receipt. Inside the envelope were 2 pages. One, a dated letter from the New York Military Academy Registrar's office confirming Trump's scheduled exam date and noting his unexplained absence. The other was a sworn statement from Steedman written in clean, careful penmanship. I was paid $1,000 by Fred Trump to take the SAT for you, son. Beneath that line was a signature, and beneath the signature, proof of identity, old military records, matching handwriting samples, a scanned ID from a VA hospital bed. Jasmine read it again, though she didn't need to. Every word was burned into her bloodstream. Now, this wasn't just about IQ anymore. It wasn't even about arrogance. This was about a lie, so old, so carefully buried that its truth had started to smell like myth. And yet, here it was, sitting quietly under her hand. Across the room, Trump was still talking, bragging about how he aced every test, every time, how some people just aren't cut out for excellence. His voice carried like static, empty, endless. He had no idea the floor was crumbling beneath him. Jasmine didn't interrupt. She didn't even flinch because the trap was now fully set. And the next time she spoke, it wouldn't be to respond. It would be to expose. Therum settled into its rhythm again. But Jasmine wasn't listening. She wasn't here to ride the noise. She was here to house it. And Trump, so loud, so sure, was giving her every tool she needed. The chairman called on her for questioning. Joe, she stood. Slowly, no rush, no dramatics, just precision in motion. She approached the microphone with the same energy she brought into courtrooms, not to shout, but to disassemble. Mr. Trump Shabagan, voice calm, almost soft. In your remarks earlier, you referred to yourself as a very stable genius, and so my own, who's always tested exceptionally well. Is that correct? Trump grinned, already puffing with pride. That's right, I've always tested extremely well. Some of the best scores they've ever seen. Not just IQ, SATs, too. That's how I got into Wharton. Jasmine nodded slowly, letting silence wrap around the words like rope. And you've made public claims about your academic success before, haven't you, that you graduated at the top of your class? Absolutely, he said. You can ask anyone. Tremendous marks. Wharton Leved, my professor's very impressed. The room stayed quiet, but the air grew sharp. Jasmine's gaze didn't shift. Would you be willing to make those records public, sir? Your SAT scores, your college transcripts. Since you brought them into the public discourse, Trump scoffed. Sure, I've got nothing to hide. I've said it for years. Happy though, show them. They prove everything I've said. I passed with flying colors. Everyone knows it. Across the chamber, some aides started to glance at each other. Marjorie stopped writing. Even Jim Jordan leaned forward slightly.